Almost every meaningful endeavor begins with the same setup, a distant, ambitious goal standing on the horizon, demanding our immediate attention and energy. The brain responds to this distance by releasing a massive surge of early motivation. It essentially tricks us into sprinting toward the objective, treating a marathon as if it were a 100-meter dash. This hurried, hyper-focused state immediately narrows our field of vision. By staring exclusively at the horizon, we become blind to the actual terrain beneath our feet, leaving us completely vulnerable to the minor, everyday obstacles scattered in our path. Relying strictly on raw motivation and maximum velocity builds a highly fragile operating system. Because it requires perfect conditions to function, the smallest amount of friction is enough to derail the entire effort. When that unsustainable sprint finally collides with an unexpected minor barrier, the resulting crash is abrupt. Forward momentum collapses. This chart visualizes what psychologists call an expectation discrepancy. Notice how the aggressive expectation line shoots straight upward, while the mathematical reality of early progress continues to drag along the bottom. The sheer mathematical gap between where we assume we should be and where we actually are generates heavy emotional burnout. A goal that felt inspiring just days ago suddenly feels physically impossible to reach. During this burnout phase, our perspective violently shrinks. The broader context of the journey disappears, forcing the brain to fixate entirely on the immediate failures sitting in front of us. The primary threat to long-term success is rarely the physical obstacle itself. The true threat is our psychological surrender to a disrupted timeline. The most effective countermeasure to this specific paralysis involves doing the exact opposite of what feels natural, bringing all forward movement to an absolute halt. This is a deliberate, mindful recalibration. It requires detaching the physical act of stopping from the emotional concept of quitting. By pulling your attention away from the massive future objective and focusing closely on a single, insignificant detail in your immediate environment, you interrupt the brain's fixation on heavy expectations. Deliberately practicing gratitude in this pause state acts as a cognitive reset button. It actively lowers the psychological stakes and immediately bleeds off the brain's acute stress load. Pausing to appreciate the present environment is a necessary, strategic mechanism. It is how you recover the mental bandwidth required for the long walk ahead. With cognitive capacity restored, you can initiate movement again, but the frantic sprint is replaced by a smooth, deliberate, and rhythmic pace. This animation illustrates the accumulation model. It is the mathematical principle that true progress is governed almost entirely by the consistency of your input, rather than the speed of your initial velocity. The highest risk of failure occurs exactly here. For a long duration, these steady, early efforts continue accumulating, yet they remain entirely beneath the threshold of visible results. Contrast this steady input against those frantic, erratic bursts of energy from earlier. The wild spikes burn out quickly and fail to compound, while the quiet accumulation of blocks simply continues its unbroken march underneath. Eventually, the math tips in your favor. The compounded weight of those microscopic actions breaches the threshold, revealing undeniable, massive upward momentum. Unstoppable momentum is never generated by exhausting, massive leaps. It is built strictly through the unglamorous compounding of patient steps. To accurately measure what has been accomplished, we have to pull back and evaluate the data from a much wider angle. Applying a macro perspective to the timeline alters the reality of the journey. When analyzed over months and years, the sheer scale of time compresses those early, devastating obstacles into minor, barely noticeable dips in the data. Looking at this topographical map, the true volume of ground covered becomes clear. The total distance traveled incrementally across this landscape far exceeds what a panicked sprint could have ever managed. This is the paradox of progress. Letting go of the desperate need to arrive instantly is exactly the mechanism that ensures we eventually arrive at all. The ultimate value of the effort is not confined to the mere act of crossing a finish line. It is found in the baseline resilience and internal peace constructed during the walk. When the ultimate objective is reached, the sensation is rarely one of exhausted, gasping relief. It is replaced by a quiet, grounded satisfaction. Gentleness, deliberate gratitude, and steady consistency prove themselves to be the most highly reliable engines for any personal ambition. Till then, stay patient, stay grateful,